Ellie's fun pun times finally arrive in the show, countless perfect replicas of the game, new lore for the bandit group, and a very ominous crumbling floor. This one is definitely a fun ride. Today I'm back to recap episode 4 of The Last of Us and delve into the smaller details you might have missed, game parallels, and plenty of behind the scenes information. A PSA right up front, episode 5 is streaming early because of the Super Bowl, whatever that sorcery is, so we will have more of The Last of Us coming this Friday. That said, there are no major future spoilers in this video, so fret not if this is your first journey into The Last of Us. We opened the episode with Ellie playing around with Frank's gun she secretly took in the previous episode. This is already a departure from the game, where Ellie only got her gun after a run-in with the bandits. So the scene we get in the show of Joel giving it to her properly is a bit of a remix from the game. I think this is just another case of balancing gameplay and story, as in the game, this entire section is very combat heavy, whereas the show choose to take a slower and more deliberate approach to Joel trusting her with her own gun. Regarding Ellie's bizarre fascination with guns though, Craig here talks about how they added the scene to further convey how she's almost obsessed with power. When Joel first beat the dude when they were escaping the QZ, she never turned away. She grows attached to Joel because she believes he is powerful and will protect her. All throughout this episode, for example, we see how she is scared, but when Joel affirms that they'll be fine, she can rest. This angle will continue to be explored later in the series, so we'll touch on this again relatively soon. As she leaves the gas station and regroups with Joel, however, we get to a part of the episode that is basically ripped right out of the game. Ellie's puns, while not exactly one-for-one, are lifted right out of the game, as there too she'd fire off some of these very punny jokes from the same exact book. Also, Joel siphoning the gas is a clear nod to the game, where Bill's last words to him as they left were,
"You'd be amazed at how many cars still got gas in them."
Though a small thing I've begun to notice more and more is how much the series pays attention to these small details of realism, like gas expiring for example. There are many more in this episode as well, like the whole Joel losing his hearing from firing guns without ear protection. But I think it's one of those things that just really helps ground the narrative. Just like the cold open of episode 1 and the scientist talking about what is a very real fungus, it just plants the seed in your mind that this could happen to you. And it's that relatability that just makes this whole thing feel that much spookier. And I, for one, think that's just super neat. They then get into the car, and once again, the show replicates the game beat for beat. Only thing it doesn't replicate is that page of the comic. If you know, you know. Don't look it up, it's a big spoiler, but the rest of it is essentially word for word. The music and it apparently being before Joel's time is replicated exactly, and it's only the song order that is switched here, with the first one in the game being very on the nose I know, but I'll never get out of this world alive, and Alone and Forsaken is the second song. Also, the whole magazine thing and Ellie joking around about the pages being stuck together is ripped right out of the game, and just like the game, gave me a very solid laugh. Though as we enter the second big block of the episode, we once again diverge from the games a little and see them camp out for the night. In the game, the scenes we get of them in the car originally, and then Joel saying her to get some sleep, are just truncated, and we don't see this camping bit in between. They just keep on driving, and that's it. Though with the camping out scene, I think they've done a great job of constantly chipping away at Joel's armor. Something that I originally thought would be a lot more difficult with all the time that's lost from just removing actual gameplay. Though with Ellie's puns throughout the episode and the whole undermining of this, let's be real, very depressing situation, I think they're doing a really great job of replicating that dynamic that we see in the game. And the scene that I think best encompasses that is Ellie saying,
"No one's gonna find us."
Though clearly picking up on the fact that she is scared and looking for affirmation, Joel simply responds,
"No one's gonna find us."
Okay.
But of course, as soon as she falls asleep, we see him with the rifle keeping watch. From Ellie's perspective, she already saw what he can do for her with the dude back in episode 1. So for her, she just takes him at his word. But clearly, Joel is lying here. He isn't certain that everything will go smooth, and that's exactly why he stands watch. This would be replicated once more at the tail end of the episode, so we'll touch on that again. Getting back to the car, we see another case of Joel beginning to open up as Ellie begins to ask about Tommy. Like I just mentioned with the whole puns, and Craig also mentions that in the companion podcast, it's our first proper glimpse of Joel opening up without even realizing it. this is the first time he actually just talks. He doesn't just bluntly respond to a question. He actually begins to tell her who Tommy is, how he met Tess, what happened with them, and so on. Though the best part for me here is definitely Ellie asking,
If you don't think there's hope for the world, why bother going on?
You keep going for family.
I'm not family.
No. Your cargo.
Of course, like I just said, Joel might have let her in on some of his story, but clearly he is not ready to drop his guard and let him experience the same exact pain he felt 20 years ago. So how will this relationship develop? Joel's armor is clearly already falling, so will Joel be the one to fire off puns in the near future? Who knows? And the last thing we see here is another straight rip from the game. Joel tells Ellie to get some sleep, to which Ellie responds that she's not even tired, which is then followed up with... Brilliant comedic timing aside, we then see them arrive at Kansas City, which, if you've played the game, is very much not Pittsburgh. Craig here says that it is literally just a case of practicality. In the story, the fact that this city is Pittsburgh literally doesn't change anything. It's a city, and that is it. So from a production standpoint, it was just easier to replicate Kansas than it was Pittsburgh, and it's not really much more than just a superficial change. And to go off on a quick tangent regarding these sort of superficial changes, there's also been a debate going on in the community around some songs in the series that are technically released after 2003 and the apocalypse. Personally, and this is coming from someone who is a huge nerd about these tiny details, I really could not care less if a song is released in 2005 and technically shouldn't exist in the series. A vast majority of people will never know about these release dates, and unlike something super practical like the hearing loss or gas expiring, it literally has zero effect on the story. We'll see how this geographic change affects what happens next, but I'm just taking Craig at his word, and yeah, this is just a superficial change for the sake of practicality. Though in story, we see that it's barricaded off, which then prompts them to go around. Here we also see some classic map reading shenanigans and Joel clearly being lost, but soon thereafter, we see that we are most certainly not the only people in town, as we see a still smoking pile of skelly bobs. And once again, we converge right back to the game as a man stumbles into the street, to which Joel responds by saying,
Put your seatbelt on.
This entire section is a lot more actiony in the game, and instead of just a few dudes, Joel has to take on a small army. Again, I think this is just a case of translating gameplay sections to the story, and with the show generally being a lot more grounded, I think this smaller battle for survival just fits in better than the Terminator Joel we see in the game. Though in story, we once again see that Ellie is scared out of her mind, and Joel once again reaffirms her that she will not be hit. But despite Joel getting what seems to be all of them, the last guy still gets the upper hand and begins to choke Joel out. In the game, this happens a few gameplay sections later as the duo have to fight their way through, again, a small army, and instead of Joel being choked out in this little store building they crash into, it happens later on and Joel is being drowned. Though similar to the game, Ellie walks out and shoots the dude, freeing Joel. In the game, this was a kill shot, while in the show, she merely wounded him, upon seeing which, Joel once again tells her to go to the other room, and we see a super interesting subversion. I think I'm not alone in saying that I expected to hear that signature single gunshot, but that is not what happens, and instead we hear just a single stabbing noise. Craig here talks about how it was important for them to ground the violence that we see. In the game, it effectively just becomes noise. For gameplay's sake, the game literally throws dozens of enemies at you, so you'll happily be blasting off your shotgun like it's no one's business. But the show takes a more deliberate approach, with 1, the knife clearly being a lot more personal than a firearm, 2, the guy is actively begging for mercy, and 3, there's that cold reality of ammo being scarce, so shooting him is just a waste. Though we then cut away from Joel and Ellie and jump on over to a TV-only character. We meet Kathleen, who is interrogating their doctor for any leads of someone named Henry. So what exactly has this Henry done to anger them to such an extent that they're willfully shooting their own doctor? A profession that is clearly among the most valuable in the apocalypse. Is this really purely personal? Would they go to such extents for their own? Could this Henry be linked to the dude and the kid we see at the end of the episode? Only time will tell. Though regarding this group, Craig talks about how they always thought the best thing you could do in a story like The Last of Us is fleshing out your antagonists, saying that he doesn't think it's likely we'd devolve to a Mad Max world with everyone being at each other's throats for no discernible reason. Rather, our interests would simply clash in some capacity, and that is what would spark conflicts. So by giving us this insight into what this group is up to, it tells us that Joel and Ellie, at this point in time at least, really don't matter to them, and they've simply gotten caught up in a crossfire. Though yes, this look into how they operate and actually naming the characters is TV exclusive, and they are mainly faceless baddies in the game. Cutting back to Joel and Ellie, we get what has to be the saddest scene in this episode, as Joel once again drops his guard and simply apologizes, saying that he should have heard the guy coming and that Ellie shouldn't have. I absolutely loved how raw this moment was, with Joel not even finishing this sentence. Obviously, it's no coincidence that Sarah and Ellie are both 14. As much as Joel tries to put up his walls, it's clear that he is already beginning to see Ellie as his surrogate daughter. And clearly, seeing her commit such an act of violence hurts. Joel views himself as the go-getter, as the protector. Literally in the first episode, we see him ramble on about how he has to bail out Tommy. Something we also see referenced in this episode, as Joel says that he is constantly helping him and that he was always a hopeless dreamer. So again, he sees himself as responsible for him. And big surprise, now too he finds himself going on a search to find him and take care of him. Remember that this whole Ellie mission is a side quest for him right now. Originally, the goal was to find Tommy. Then there is Sarah, his daughter who he failed to protect and is the prime reason why he actively tries pushing Ellie away. He is not ready to feel that loss again. And as if that wasn't enough, Tess, who Joel himself referred to as family, too died right by his side. So this scene here, in my mind, just challenges that belief he holds that he alone must protect everyone. As this time, he was the one being protected and he hates that. And to jam that knife even further into your heart, as Joel actually says,
And I'm sorry.
Ellie finally cracks, letting a tear roll down her face and then saying,
It wasn't my first time.
So what is this referring to? Has she already been forced to fight someone? Is this in some way connected to her getting bit originally? Is this perhaps in some way connected to her parents? Only time will tell. And the final thing we see here is Joel properly giving her the gun as well as some basic practice on how to hold it. Again, in the game, this whole section is a little different, as she also does a whole bunch of shooting with the rifle, so giving her this handgun is more so a form of trust. But in terms of adapting the scene, it plays out relatively similarly. Returning to Kathleen, we see a few very interesting scenes. First off, just a fun fact, Perry, the right-hand man of Kathleen with the awesome beard, is played by Tommy's voice actor from the game, so I guess that's pretty neat. Though secondly, we see them enter this building where, in the basement, we see that the concrete itself has been entirely broken up, and something under there appears to be moving. Clearly, Perry demonstrates here that it's been there for a while, asking, when are we going to tell the others? But Kathleen decides that not yet, of course implying that she alone calls the big picture shots here. If you've played the games, you can make a very well-educated guess what's under there, and if you've been paying very close attention to the show, you might also suspect what that is. But of course, I won't spoil the surprise for those of you who still don't know. If you really want to know what it is, I'll pin a comment about that below the video. This entire deal is TV only, so all of us are going in with no knowledge of exactly what will transpire, and especially after last week's episode, I mean, technically anything could happen, but it should be a ton of fun regardless. Luckily, with the early release of the next episode, we'll see what happens relatively soon. Our final scenes of the episode take us back to Joel and Ellie, where Ellie asks, how did Joel know that this whole thing was an ambush? To which Joel responds,
I've been on both sides.
Did you kill innocent people?
This is another straight rip from the game, though the following exchange does differ a little. In the game, Joel literally just grunts, to which Ellie joyfully and half-jokingly responds, I'll take that as a yes. In the show, on the other hand, Joel simply refuses to respond, creating this moment of uncomfortable silence. Just like Ellie not turning away when Joel was beating the dude in episode 1, which too was a departure from the game, I think the show is just more explicitly showing us why Ellie grew so attached to Joel, and how her fascination with guns, power, and being able to take care of herself made him a natural role model of sorts. Though this of course also sparks questions about what exactly did Joel get into before we caught up with him those 20 years later. It's already been made clear that he is not a hero by any means. But with him now saying that he's also been on the other side of such an exchange, just how desensitized is he to the world? And more importantly, what extents would he be willing to go to? On the flip side, we also see Joel ask Ellie what she meant about this not being her first time hurting people, to which she responds by saying that she just doesn't want to talk about it. This is of course a not so subtle hint that Joel is beginning to care for her, as despite him not really pushing any further, he is clearly showing interest in what has happened to her in the past. Another thing that I briefly mentioned before is Joel saying that his hearing is weakened because of firing guns too much. First off, like I already mentioned before, this is just another small detail that makes the world feel just that much more real. To all of my fellow Walking Dead fans out there, you'll know that hearing loss from gunfire is a bit of a meme in the show, and MatPat even made a film theory about how the reason why people are constantly getting snuck up on in situations where they really shouldn't have gotten snuck up on is exactly because firing guns indoors damages your hearing. Also, the whole scattering glass thing is of course your typical stealth mechanic in games, as well as a callback to them stepping on glass in episode 2 and alerting the clickers. Though lastly, and for me most importantly, I think this also shows us just how observant Ellie is to pick up on such a minute detail in the first place. It tells us that despite her whimsical attitude of firing off puns left, right, and center, she is constantly paying attention and watching Joel, which I think further shows us how she has already started to look up to him. So, what more will she glean from Joel's behavior and answers in the future? Maybe she'll grow to love coffee just like Joel and me, who knows? And the last thing we see here has to be the most wholesome scene we've gotten between the two, as yet again, Ellie is stone cold serious as she fires off yet another glorious pun. One that finally breaks Joel, and he laughs.
I didn't laugh.
Yes, you did.
Jesus, I'm losing it.
You're losing it big time.
I don't know about you, but I was smiling ear to ear as I was watching this scene, and I for one absolutely cannot wait to see this dynamic duo continue to banter around during these little off periods. Though unfortunately for our silly pun duo, that is not where we leave them. In the middle of the night, Ellie has been woken up and is calling on Joel, who has fallen asleep on his left ear and clearly not heard a thing. In the game, this meeting is much different, but we won't get into that for spoilers' sake. Point is, Ellie and Joel are both in a bit of a pickle. And in short, that is episode 4. Honestly, I think every episode so far has been excellent, but I think because of the Ellie-Joel dynamic we see in this one and the car scene specifically, this one might just edge it out to be my favorite so far. And since you've made it this far, tell me what is your favorite episode so far. I'm genuinely curious. As for episode 5, I'm still unsure how I'll go about releasing my coverage of that, but chances are that despite the early release, I might still push it to Monday and Tuesday as I would with normal episodes, as the weekend does get a little chaotic for me. On the bright side, it might also tide you over the extra few days until episode 6. But whatever the case, I hope to see you back where we'll see how Joel and Ellie get out of this mess and what exactly is hiding underneath the concrete. And that's the video. You seriously have no clue how much I've been enjoying this series so far, and despite me working mega overtime to continue pumping out double uploads weekly, I am loving this ride. And with that said, I want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my rambling, so seriously, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.